Thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Sarah Abosh Jacobson, the Barbara Rabin Chief Education Officer here at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. And this is the final session of our 2022 Summer Survivor Speaker Series. And I think you're going to really enjoy isn't the right word. I think you'll really appreciate and get engaged with, thank you, with today's talk. So before we begin, I would like to thank our community partners for the series. That would be Big Brothers Big Sisters Lone Star, Legacy Senior Communities, Mosaic Family Services, Refugee Services of Texas, Southwest Jewish Congress, Temple Shalom, Texas Holocaust Genocide and Anti-Semitism Advisory Commission. And we are really grateful for your support of the museum and our programs because you help make all of these possible. I would also like to extend a special welcome to our members, board members, and volunteers in the audience. We couldn't fulfill our mission without you and your help and your support. If you are not a museum member or a volunteer, I'll say what I always say, which is, what the heck are you waiting for? And please visit our website at dhhrm.org to learn more. You can also stop at our front desk on your way out because they can help you with that as well. Today, you will hear from Julie Meetal Berman, daughter of Holocaust survivors Magda and Les Mittelman, Zichronam Livracha, may their memory be for a blessing. Magda and Les were born in Hungary in 1923 and 1919, respectively. During the war, Les was conscripted into forced labor for the Hungarian army on the Eastern Front, subsequently escaping to join a Jewish resistance group, just a resistance group. Magda and her family were confined to a ghetto before being sent to Auschwitz, and Magda was ultimately liberated in Germany at the end of the war. In just a moment, Julie will share her parents' story with you. Then we will have time for questions and answers. If you are joining us in person today, you can use the card that you were provided at check-in to write out your question, and our staff will come around at the end of the program to collect your cards. If you are joining us virtually from home or work or wherever you might be, I hope you're not on a beach, I'm jealous, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to type out and submit your questions. It is now my very great pleasure to turn things over to Julie Meetal Berman.
Hello, thank you so much for coming out today, and for those of you who are tuning in virtually, thank you so much for joining us. Like Sarah said, my name is Julie Meetal Berman, and I am the daughter of two Holocaust survivors. So both of my parents were in the Holocaust, which makes me the second generation Holocaust survivor. So this story is about my parents and not about me at all. So here are my parents. This is Magda and Les Mittelman. Cute couple, don't you think? I think they're cute. And that picture in the middle is on their wedding day in 1945. They both came from Hungary. And if you know about Eastern Europe, Hungary is a fairly small country compared to Germany and Poland. And it's completely landlocked. So getting away quickly was really not possible in those days. My mom came from a small town called Szolnok, and my father came from the second largest city in Hungary called Debrecen. So before the Holocaust, my grandparents on my mother's side, they were pretty poor. They both worked. My grandmother was a seamstress. She made dresses for people. And my grandfather was a salesman, so he traveled around quite a bit. And the picture you see in the middle is that of my mother, who was about 3 years old, and her older sister. And the picture with the family, that's a wedding picture that was taken in 1939, probably one of the last pictures that was taken of the family together. And I can tell you that only maybe 3 people out of that photograph survived. My mother's side of the family was not religious. They would go to synagogue on holidays, but basically they were not very religious. My mom went to public school, and that's her class picture from when she was about 16 years old. My father's side of the family was a little bit more religious and a little bit better off. My grandfather had his own business. He made furniture. And many times after school, my father would go and help him out and learn the trade. He had 2 brothers and a sister, and his mom stayed home to take care of them. They were a little bit more religious than my mom's side of the family, so my father went to religious school, and that's his class picture. I don't know if you can see the little scrawny kid with the circle around him. That's him. And he also sang in the synagogue choir, but many times he would skip because he preferred playing soccer instead. So then in 1939, Germany invaded Poland and the war began. Hungary was on the German side. They didn't actually get into the war yet, but they were siding with the Nazis. So the first order that came was that all men over the age of 18 had to enlist into the military. And all of them had to go off. Pretty soon after they were enlisted, then all of the Jewish men were separated from everybody else. And soon after that, the Jewish men had to start wearing the yellow armband so they can tell them apart. And they were taken all over Hungary to start working and preparing for the Nazis at some point to come into Hungary and take over. So my father was sent with his unit, his Jewish Friends unit, to a little town called Szolnok. And that's where we begin our love story. So now you're going to get to meet my father, and he's going to tell you what happened.
Well, they sometime, where we were housing, there was a elementary school. And she had a friend maybe 2 blocks further. And they knew in the city a lot of Jewish boys there. So the Jewish girls, they came to visiting there. They saying, you need something, we can bring you, etc. There I met with her. And I was there about 10 months in Szolnok. And that's the place which is the most comfortable one, because I get a very good friend, one of the Hungarian sergeant, who knows I met with the girl and I want to go to visiting her. And sometime he take me out from the camp to let me go there, and he picked me up later to go take back to the camp.
So even though Hungary was not yet in the war, anti-Semitism was getting very bad. I'm assuming everybody knows what anti-Semitism is. And so in the next slide, you're going to get to meet my mom, and she's going to talk about how she had to start wearing the yellow star.
We gathered the yellow stars. We had to wear the yellow stars, and we can go out on the street. My mother, everybody had to make by herself. My mother did it, and I was putting on my coat, on my dress also, because I get a job, and I went to work with my, with the yellow star.
So after about 10 months in Szolnok, my father and his unit were shipped out, and they were sent to the Russian front. So the Russian front was the border between Poland and Russia, or the Soviet Union back then. And this was under German authority. So this was the first time my father actually came into contact with the Nazis. So in the next video, he's going to talk about that experience.
And there we get a German. And those Germans, they were taking us next to their barrack, And they used us for putting down mines. They signed up an area where we had to put mines there. They show us how to put, or cleaning mines. The first day experience what we had, the two boys blew up on that minefield, what they put them up. They didn't do that right, they were careless and stepped on the mine what the another one put it down, because they didn't mark them.
So here, I'm very fortunate to have these pictures. These are pictures of my father and his unit on the Russian front. And as you can see, they're wearing Hungarian army uniforms. They're still there with the Hungarian army, except that now they're under Nazi rule. So you can see here that the Jewish men are wearing the yellow armband. And then they are taken all over the Russian front to put down those landmines. So by now it's already 1944, and now Hungary actually joined the war. They actually joined the Nazi regime. And so the first order that came, once the Nazis came into Hungary, was that all the Jews had to report to the ghetto. So the ghetto could have been a building, it could have been a neighborhood, it could have been a city block, depending on how many Jews lived in that city, depended on what the ghetto would be. So since Solnok was such a small little town, the ghetto was the school building. And in the picture, you can see on the left, or on the right rather, you can see that they're boarding up the entrance. So once you're in there, you're not going out. You're not going to work, you're not going to school, you're not going to shop for food for your family. You're given a ration of food that everybody has to share. And the quarters are very tight, and everybody and their mother are all in there. And in the other picture, you can see how people are moving a few belongings in, and the Hungarian policeman standing there watching. But look at the expression on his face. I think it's very interesting. He doesn't look like he's very upset. He kind of looks pleased about what's going on. So in the next video, you're going to hear from my mom explaining how the ghetto, how they were sent to the ghetto. But first, she's going to talk about a chance meeting she had with a German who tried to warn her and why she didn't just leave. Hang on one second. Hang on, we'll go back.
First, that he was in Romania, and he saw how the Germans, they people, they picking up children on people on the street, from the street, throwing up on a truck, and they just taking it. And he told they will happen here too. Don't stay here. Go away from here. Where to go? Now where to go? And he told me that he's giving me an address in Berlin. And he told, go to Berlin. And I give you an address where to go. And I told him, I'm not going. I am not leaving my parents. I am going where my parents will go. And then one nice day there came two policemen, and I told, you have to pick up all your things, not too many things, because you are going to the ghetto. So we picked up some bedside, bed things, a pillow and a comforter, and a couple of things, dish, and on a little buggy, and we just pull it in the ghetto.
So after several weeks in the ghetto, and another order came that told everybody, get ready because you're going to be shipped out. You're going to be deported. They didn't tell them where they're sending them, but they said, we're sending you away. So here in the picture, you can see how they're being made to march down the middle of the street. And watch the people on the side. What do you see there? These people on the side who are watching this entire group being taken away, these are their neighbors, the people they used to shop with, people they went to school with. These are bystanders. They're standing there watching as this entire group of people is being taken away. You can almost see the German there. He's probably barking orders to walk faster. And so they're taken to the train station. And here you can see the looks on their faces. They're totally confused. They don't know where they're going. They don't know, should they be afraid? Should they not be afraid? They don't know what's happening to them. So in the next video, my mom is going to talk about the deportation. And she calls the trains wagons. So some people call them boxcars, other people call them cattle cars. She calls them wagons.
And nobody was telling us anything. And we was going with the second transport. The first transport went in Vienna. We didn't know that. The second transport went to Auschwitz. We didn't know where we're going. And we was in the train on this day and on the way to Auschwitz.
Were there other people on the train?
Oh, and the train was full. And the train was full with people. We hardly can sit down.
How old were you?
So I was 20. Well, they was rushing up us to the wagons. They was even pushing us up on the wagon.
Who was pushing
On
you?
the Germans. And we was about in this wagon. I mean, there was about 5, which one going, or maybe more. We was about 100 people in this wagon, and there was also an old man on the other side in a wheelchair. They was putting on with the wheelchair, and we start to go. We didn't know where we going, but we just moved out, and we was about 3 days on the road, was going, when we saw a chimney, 2 big chimney in the distance, and they was burning. The flame was high up on the sky. And my mother told us that, well, I don't know where we're going, but you get ready that maybe we're going right in the flame. And I don't know why, but I just didn't feel anything. I saw the flame. I didn't feel anything. And then we went closer to the place. Then we smelled the flesh, the burning flesh. And finally, the train pulled in and stopped.
So, 2 things. The first is that when she talks about they're going for 3 days, that means the train was moving for 3 days. There's no stops for food, no stop for water, no bathrooms to be had. So they're stuffed in there, 100 people in a wagon. And there many people passed out, many people died on that trip. So in less than 2 months, Hungary deported 440,000 Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz. Out of that 440, 320,000 excuse me, were murdered as soon as they got there. So that's a huge number to really comprehend. So if you consider that there's 20 people sitting out here in the front, that would mean, thank you, that would mean that 15 out of the 20 would have been murdered as soon as they got there. So now my mom was in Auschwitz, and here you can see the people coming off the trains. You can see the train that had just pulled in. You can see the smoke in the sky, and you can see the entrance to Auschwitz. And you see how people are running around, getting off the train, trying to find family members. They don't really know what's happening. And you see the Germans standing there in the front. You can almost hear them barking orders at them. In the other pictures, you can see how they're a little bit more organized. Men on the one side, women on the other. Notice how many more women there are than men. Remember, I told you in the beginning that all the men over the age of 18 had already been enlisted into the military. So the only ones that were still around were the ones who are too old or too young. So now my mom is going to talk about the arrival to Auschwitz.
There was all our relatives, and I was waiting until they coming down. And then I looked in, and I saw the door open in the other side. And there was the flame. And the soldier who was open the door, they pushed down the wheelchair with the old man. And then I was running after my mother, and we, two of us, it was dark, it was evening, it was raining. And my mother picked some towels and we put on the head, and we started to going. When I looked back, on the man's just still was standing there in the coat like my father outside. But when we went, it was light because all the reflectors was on. And I saw when we passed it, there was a hill of baby shoes. And right beside this, there was an older hill with eyeglasses. And I told to my mother, where we are going? And from distance, there was a fence, and the woman was standing there and hollering that, give the babies to the mother, give the babies to your grandmother or your mother. But they was keep, hollering to us. And we passed this part and we went to a bathhouse. And then we went through all this cleaning of the hair on the body, on the whole body. Well, they was coming also behind us to the same place. But when we started to go, I was looking back. He was still standing there on the first lane in the men's section. And I saw my father. He was looking so sad and so poor with this long winter coat on him. And I just wanted so much to go back to tell him a goodbye. But they was rushing us. And we went in this bathhouse, and they cleaned off us. And then after the cutting of the hair, we went to the shower. And when we came out from the shower, they gave us some rags to wear it, which one of them was this short, the other was this long. So we was trying to changing. So when we came out in a big room, there was the men's already, but very few men's came back from the shower. There wasn't more than a dozen.
So you understand that the showers, they never knew what was going to happen when they were told that they're going in the showers. You could go into the showers and it would be a shower where there was water coming down, or you would go into the shower and it would be gas, and everybody in there would have been killed. So maybe only a dozen men came back from the showers. again, because they were either too old or too young to be of any use. So now my mom was in Auschwitz, and here in these pictures you can see the conditions. They're in barracks that are very bare, wooden bunks. You can see there's 2, 3, sometimes 4 people in a bunk. Sometimes people were laying on the ground, on the concrete floor, and it was cold. There are no mattresses, there's no blankets, there's no pillows, there's nothing that would make you a little bit comfortable. And in the other picture, you see a group of women. They look fairly young. You can see how their heads have been shaven off, and they're wearing some kind of a uniform. So these women had just come through a selection. In the next video, my mom is going to talk about the selection, but she's going to talk about a Dr. Mengele. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dr. Mengele. He was known as the angel of death in Auschwitz because he would pick out people that he would want to experiment on, some horrible experiments. So now she's going to tell you all about the selections.
The selection, we went out on there was a big plot, big place before, right in the entrance, and they was taking at us, and naked. And then I saw first time Mengele, Dr. Mengele, and he was selecting. He selected out my cousin first. And she went on then a couple of weeks later, they tried to do it to hurt us. On the holidays, there was always selection. On every selection, Mengele showed up. The second selection was about in Rosh Hashanah. And then they selected me. And we were sitting there on the plots, upper plots they called, and waiting for to go. They take it to the or in the shower or right to the station, but usually they give it some normal dress before, they send it to a transport. So, but we were sitting there on the front of the, entrance and was waiting there, and I was thinking about my mother, that I leave my mother and my sister and my youngest sister. I always felt she was always very, very thin, and my mother always worried about her, and I was worried too, and I didn't want to leave them. And then I just jumped up and I started to running. And there was a German soldier who was a priest in civil, and a bunch of women around him and listening, his predication. And then I just crawled in the middle. And then saw the post who was after me. He lost me. So I went back to my mother and sister, and we was there until Yom Kippur, and there was an order selection, and they selected my sister. And then I was smarter because I tried to hide him. And they selected my sister. And my sister went. My sister was gone. Later, they was making a selection again. And every selection I was hiding. And I never was in my mind that they will select old people or not young people. Because until this time, they always was selecting the young people who they take at work, here and there and everywhere. And this time I was hiding, and my mother was on the selection when I came back, I find out that my mother is not there. I was running out on the street and I saw my mother is marching, marching there with a bunch of women. They all has a white hair. And I started to running after her and hollering her, but I don't know, he didn't hear me. And I was keep running on the blockade tester, who was responsible for everybody. She was running after me, and she was trying to find on me. And she told, you have to come back, and don't worry about the people. Don't worry about my mother, where she went. Then she was telling me that she by herself was taking her mother to the gas chamber. And it wasn't felt me better, I tell you the truth.
So now my mom was alone. Her sister was taken, her cousin, and her mom was gone. But a couple of months later, the Germans decided to move 2 train loads of prisoners from Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen was another concentration camp in Germany. And the reason they decided to move them was because the Russians were starting to come from the east over that border, and they were afraid that they would liberate Auschwitz. So they moved these 2 train loads to Bergen-Belsen. And if you've ever read the story of Anne Frank, she was on one of these 2 trains as well. So remember where we left my father? We left him over there on the Russian front, and he was being shipped all up and down the border, putting down landmines. So now the Russians are really coming over that border. And so the commander of his battalion decided to move back into Poland. And as they're moving back into Poland, a wagon breaks down, a wagon that carries all of their supplies. And the German in charge found out that my father knew how to build things from working with his father when he was younger. So he told my father, pick a couple of guys and you stay here at the side of the road and fix the wagon, and we're going on ahead, and when you're done, you just come and follow us. So my father stood there waiting till they were out of sight, and he looked at his friends and he said, I'm not an idiot. I'm not following them. And the 3 of them took off into a nearby forest. And when they got into this forest, they came across a group of people who said that they were partisans. So partisans is a resistance group, organization. And they said, if you want to join us, you can join us. What we do is we go out at night mostly, and we sabotage. We'll blow up the Germans' wagons, their warehouses, their bridges, the tunnels, anything that we can do to hold them back and allow time for the Russians to come along and liberate Poland. So my father joined, and what he found that this group was a large resistance organization, and they had people who were Jewish, they were Polish, they were Russian, they were Hungarians. Anybody who wanted to help could join the group. There were men, there were women, they were Jewish, Catholic, Christian, whatever you want. Anybody who wanted to join to help was in this group. So my father and his group went to Warsaw, which was about to be liberated. The name of his group was called the Polish Home Army. And so as the Russians were starting to come across, the Germans still had control of Warsaw. My father and his friends were there. So in the next slide, you're going to hear my father tell you what happened there.
The Warsaw was under German occupation. Germans, they were there. The ghetto was burned already. And they knew it. We have to go in because the Russians getting close to the river, and another side, Wisla. That was the name of the river which is cut at Warsaw half. One side, that was name was the river Wisla. One side was Warsaw City, on the other side, some suburb or whatever. So they expected there the Russian. We was planning to stay there on opposite side, the German side, to anything what we can destroy there. We were 18 people there. And we were hiding daytime in the houses. In the evening we went out. The second evening, I was together with one of my friends, and the big guy, and with another, with Smith, and we was playing with the machine gun. We was set up with the machine gun. And the German patrol who came around there, and that's what we were holding them up. And we had to move back because they were coming up, the Germans, with the tanks. So we moved back about 5 miles from there, about 5 miles, about an hour and a half walk back in the forest, so not to find us. And there they had some small place, building, some kind of storage, something. We put them there to sit there during the daytime. The Germans, they know they have groups there around that city, which is guerrilla groups, and they want to get rid of it. And the German airplane, Germans took us, they came at daytime looking us. And they find that building because he turned back, and when we saw his turn back, we jumped out from the building, and some ditches closed there. We lay down there. They started to hit bombing that building, and they shooting machine gun. So that building, what we had, I just started. We went there when we got there to sleeping there. I took off everything, just the pants in the shirt I had there. And there I had the watch in my pocket that I got from my girlfriend when I met with her in Sonor before we left. He gave me a silver watch, a flat one, what they were wearing in the small pocket. I left there, so the watch is burned there with my everything else. And we were lucky because we got away without any scratch with the German gun, and we tried to go back to the unit. So we got back to the basic unit, and the third day we went back to the Warsaw again, because every night a different group went there. So the third night was our tour to go there. So I went there, we were sitting on the top of the storage place, on a higher place, we were sitting there. And the Germans, they were patrolling, and they show us up there on the hill, on the top of the building, and they started shooting us. And we was replying there, and I was in the machine gun, and Sam, he was with me with the belt, which is the heavy, they call them, and the bullet to get into the gun. And a minute I'm telling Sam, I don't get supply. I stuck. What are you doing? I looking at Sam had no head. They cut. They were shooting them with the machine guns, and I don't know, they was some kind of grenades, and probably that one of them cut his head. Just he had no hair, right next to me. Oh my God, I said, I had full bloody. And behind the building was my friend who was preparing to fill the belt with the bullet. I said to him, Reisner, let's go from here, because the gun is gone. We have no way where to stay here. And we tried to go, getting darker that day. We tried to go next to the building. We were laying down behind them. And we know we had a plan to 10 o'clock evening to get one spot where we're supposed to get together to moving back further. And evening, I said, no, Rainer, we have to move. So we started to going slowly, and they were shoot up those candles like with the air, the shooting up candles, which is coming back down with the parachute, and they light up the whole area. So when they shoot up, they picked up us with the light, and they started the shooting. The first cut, what they getting, I get hit. They hit me, my leg, a couple of places. My legs get hit from here down, and I couldn't stand up on it. And I am telling to my friend, Reisner, I can't stand on my legs. Would you help me to go try to get to the house? He said to me, "You crazy. How can I help you? Everyone is gonna die here. I can't help you. I can't help myself." And he left me there. So I was staying there. You know, the biggest wound was my knee. And I had to tear my shirt and try to clean in the top like that, but I couldn't move. So I would stay there about get completely dark, and I tried to crawling from there. And again, you know, the candles went up in the air, and they saw me there, and I got a second time. And they shoot me that time on my arm, my head, and on my back. So I was there. I couldn't move. I was bleeding there, and I left there unconscious. And I waked up next couple of hours later, probably. They were carrying me. They're carrying me on the stretcher to Polak. They're taking me somewhere. At that time, I have to mention to you, I was wearing a Hungarian army uniform. What we was taking during the time when we were in the guerrillas, they were robbing one of the storage places what they had, the armies there. So they didn't know who I am. They know I had wearing a uniform, which is not Polish, not Russian. They know the Germans, that's a Hungarian uniform. So they carried me to the first aid place. They took me to first aid place, and the two boys who there carried the stretcher, they know me because they were part of there, but they get caught with the Germans. They caught him. And one of them is telling me in my ear, "Don't worry, Magyar." That's the way the Polak call the Hungarian. "Don't worry, Magyar." M-A-G-A. Because we're not going to tell them who you are.
So my father was shot, 13 bullets across his body. And they took him to this field hospital where a doctor operated on him. And in his delirium and in surgery, the doctor realized that this guy's Jewish. So the doctor not only saved his life by doing surgery, but also saved his life because he put my father in a separate room, quarantining him away from the German patients that were in that field hospital. And the doctor would come every day and change his bandages and bring him food and nurse him back to health. Not really nurse him back to health because he was still pretty wounded. But after a few weeks there, the doctor came one night and said, "Tonight after dark, I want you to crawl out the window and leave here because tomorrow we're being shipped back to Germany. The Russians are going to take over Warsaw and we're getting shipped out of here." So that night, my father crawled out the window with crutches and tried to make his way back to Hungary. The war was over. So
Well, we was
Sorry. So the war was over, and there was a lot of confusion, as you can imagine. There were American soldiers, there were British soldiers, there were Russian soldiers, and everybody wanted to go home. There were survivors, those few who could still maneuver on their own, who tried to get home to their families. So my mom had to make her way all the way from Germany through Austria and back to Hungary. She went back home, to where she used to live, hoping to find some family members there. She didn't know who survived and who didn't. She knew that her parents were gone, but she knew that who else would be there. So she sent a telegram to Debrecen, hoping that my father survived. And she said in her telegram, "I am back, come and get me." At the same time, my father was making his way back on crutches, and you can imagine it was difficult. There were no trains. All the trains had already been bombed out by the Allies during the war. So a lot of it was on foot or catching a ride with someone. When he got back to Debrecen, he found that his mother and his older sister with a 5-year-old survived, which was very unusual. It was really a miracle. And he got her telegram. So he right away left and went to Szolnok to find her. But when he got there, he didn't find her. My mom, when she got back, she went to different towns to look for family members where they used to live. But every time she would go to a different town, she would leave a note to say, "If Les comes, tell him I went to that town." And in the next town, she left a note saying, "If Les comes, tell him I went to this town." So when he got to Szolnok, he found a note that said she went to that town. So he went there and didn't find her, but found a note. And so he followed her notes throughout the little areas where her family used to live until he finally caught up with her. And they were married the next day. And you saw their picture in the beginning. So they got married, and they're trying to put their lives together again. And they had a little baby. And in 1949, Hungary decides to become a communist country. And my father said, "That's it, I'm done with Hungary. We're out of here." So they had to really escape, because you just don't leave a communist country. And like you saw in the movie Sound of Music, they had to literally walk across the border with a 2-year-old baby and just whatever they could carry over to Austria. And from Austria, they made their way to Italy. And from Italy, they took a boat and they went to Israel. Israel was a brand new country. And when they get there, guess what's going on? There's a war going on. So right away, my father had to join, but this time he was fighting for the reestablishment of the Jewish homeland. So I was born in Israel, and in 1964, we moved to the United States. And in 1986, my parents joined me here in Texas. And here we are, the family that has grown since. And I'd like to leave you with a message from my father. When he did this interview, at the end of the video, he said, "I want to leave a message to whoever might see this in the future." He said, "If you think something like the Holocaust could never happen again, you're wrong." He said, "And if you think it can't happen here in the United States, you're very wrong. And if you think it can only happen to the Jewish people, you're dead wrong." He said, "It can happen so fast you wouldn't even realize what was happening." He said, "Always pay attention to what's going on around you. Always do your own research. Don't just believe whatever anybody says to you as fact. Do your research. Find out for yourself what's real and what's not real." So with that, I'm thanking you for coming out today. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you all so much. So we have a few questions that have come in from some of the folks online. The first question is, did your parents talk to you about their experiences when they were young? Excuse me, when you were young. I'm sorry.
When I was young, yeah. Actually, no, they did not talk to me. They really, they didn't want to tell me. They didn't want me to have, to know of their experience. They wanted to move on with their lives. I actually didn't hear their entire story until they did this video. And by then I was 40 years old. So, I mean, I always knew that there was something, there was always like a dark cloud, but I never knew the details until they agreed to do the interview.
Okay. Julie, do you know if your parents had any sense of kind of the danger that was coming for Jews in Hungary when the war started?
I think they were in total denial. My mom said that my grandfather believed that they were Hungarians. They were part of the Hungarian society. And he said, it'll never happen here. We're good Hungarians. It'll never happen here. So they were in total denial. And remember, back in those days, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have telephones like we have today. And information took a long time to get from one area to the other. So they heard rumors, and like my mom met a German soldier who tried to warn her, but they didn't really believe that it could happen to them.
Okay. Do you think that your parents' experiences in the Holocaust affected the way in which they raised you and your sibling?
Yes, definitely. My parents were always very, very protective, and overly protective, and I probably am overly protective of my children because of it. But yeah, it affected me. I believe that, especially from my father, I became very much of a realist, always analyzing things and watching things, and always aware of what the standing is for Jews in the world.
What inspires you to continue sharing your parents' story, and what is it that you hope people will take away from hearing their stories?
Well, I continue to tell the story because it's very important, especially today, more so than even 10 years ago. It's unfortunately, anti-Semitism has risen its ugly head again. And now here in the United States, you just have to log on to the internet and you can see all the hate that's being spread around. So I believe education is probably the best way to fight it, although I believe that a lot of times, even with our education and as hard as we try, this kind of hate is not born. This kind of hate is taught in the home, where we can't be there to monitor. And unfortunately, it's just passed on from one generation to the other. But hopefully we can have the kids coming in here, people like yourselves coming to the museum and doing their own research and teaching and talking to other people.
Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your story with us, and thank you all for joining us today.
Oh.